meeting. And first thing we're going to do is do a roll call.
Committee Member Edens.
Here.
Committee Member McCutcheon.
Here.
Chair Garitano.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda here is approval of the minutes from the December 1st meeting. Their motion for approval made by Councilmember Eden, second by Councilmember McCutcheon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Meeting minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda, we've got the review of proposed modifications to fees assessed by the city across all departments. So we've got an attachment there. By the way, nice job with that. So I am going to open it up. I'm not sure if that's Steve, Joe, Kathy, who wants to summarize?
All of the above. I'll just kick off real quick, and then Joe and Kathy. So we put together this list of the fees. We've updated them. Joe looked at it. I looked at it, and we've gotten input from various sources. This is by no means a final document, but it is every fee that we can think of that we are currently charging. There are some suggested changes, and there are some that where it says no change. There are reasons for that. Either it just wouldn't fly based on competition around town, at least in our opinion anyway, or it might be because of ordinance, or those kinds of things. So it's pretty comprehensive. But there were opportunities to raise some of the fees where we thought we could do that and not get pushback. But there's quite a few of them that we feel that we are unable to charge fees simply because it doesn't make sense as the city. So that's what this represents. There's some dollars, that can be had, but I mean, this is not going to pay for erosion control or pay for the internet, by fees. I can tell you that. And as Joe and I were talking earlier this week, we still want to scrub this. So, I mean, this is a good talking point for today, but we really want to delve into some other things and see if we can't maybe tighten some of this up. But we're certainly open to suggestions. So that's my spiel, and Joe can take it from there.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as Steve mentioned, a lot of the fees that you see on the table originated somewhere either in the Department of Planning or the Department of Planning and Parks. And certainly we can go through them individually. That would be at the discretion of the three chairs of the standing committees. But I just would like to highlight just a couple of items relative to what the department did. The department thought it would be reasonable, first and foremost, to define what the consumer price index has done since 1995 to 2021. And going on the website that hosts the CPI index, it appears that a $300 charge in 1995 would now be around $521 in 2021. That equates to about a 70% increase. So a lot of the numbers that are reflected in terms of increases in the zoning and subdivision side of things reflects that 70% increase, if not just a bit more. And so, for example, the zoning district change or modification, that's the zoning application fee, for lack of a better term or terms, that's been $300 since the day we opened the doors as the city of Wildwood. Applying that 70% increase would get us around $500. So that's just an example. And that is borne through all of those fees relative to site plans, conditional use, board of adjustment, et cetera, et cetera. I would note that the department is recommending a slight increase in fees for pavilion rentals outside Community Park, meaning at Anniversary Park and Old Pond School Park. As you know, Glenn Gailey cleans those facilities after events. And so again, trying to adhere to the rule of revenue neutral, those increases will get us closer to revenue neutral than not. On page 2, the department did identify several new events or opportunities. And one of those, and probably one that'll be the most controversial, is a fee for zoning authorizations as part of the building permit process that we partner with St. Louis County at this time. Since the inception of the city in 1995, we have not charged a fee to process zoning authorizations. And there may have been rationale at the time for that. It seemed like a much simpler process in 1995, particularly when I was doing it, because I'm pretty simple at it. But nowadays, it requires not only the planning technician in the Department of Planning, but the code inspector that is shared by the Department of Planning and the Department of Public Works, the assistant city engineer, and at times the director of Public Works and the director of Planning and Parks, as well as the assistant director of Planning and Parks. So a lot of resources now go into the zoning authorization process for a range of uses, whether it's industrial, commercial, or residential. And so the department is recommending a $50 fee be added or included now as part of that. In terms of what's that impact on a typical zoning authorization, take, for example, just an interior remodel of a basement or the addition of a deck on a new home. Those projects cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so from the perspective of the department, a $50 additional fee should not be something that would ruffle too many feathers. It may, but it shouldn't. Now, there is a fee charged at St. Louis County for the building permit process that they administer under the contract with the city, but that's a percent of construction. So if a project costs $10,000, it's usually, I believe, about 7% or something along those lines. So $50 per authorization. Roughly, we did 1,000 authorizations last year in 2020. So that would be $50,000 of additional revenue to the city. An argument can be made that it could be higher given the cost of projects these days, particularly when it's single family dwellings. So again, that's just the starting point. The last item I just wanted to identify and then kind of turn it over to Kathy if she'd like to add anything regarding the list is the code enforcement violations. As you know, since 2014, the municipal court system has been under great scrutiny by the state legislature as well as the Missouri Supreme Court. There have been a number of regulations and laws promulgated to address the situation. And now code enforcement violations, the maximum fine for first offense is $200. And that is the maximum set by state statute. So there is no change there. As much as I'd like to ramp it up a bit, I couldn't. And that's the rationale why. So those are the highlights. Again, just summarizing. Many of the fee increases are based upon the consumer price index of about a 70% increase over the last 25 plus years. Certain events, as we've talked about in past meetings, have reflected change that was recommended by the committee. The pavilion fees, I think, are getting closer to revenue neutral. And then finally, the last two, zoning authorization and code enforcement. One I would like to increase because there's no charge, and the other I can't. Thank you.
Kathy, do you have anything?
Do not covered it all. Thank you.
All right. All right. So let me preface with just a couple of comments. First of all, thank you very much for the work that you did to review the fees. And again, to refresh everyone's memory, these are fees that have been in place since the city was incorporated 25 years ago. And again, fees that have not changed since that time. So obviously, something that we don't want to repeat probably going forward. We want to do a more periodic refresher so that just like if you were to see these fees, you would not be shocked by the change. But I think too, given that these fees or the frequency of these fees is not as high, for the typical resident, you're not going in for a zoning authorization, every other year. It's pretty much just an exception. Um, probably the pavilion rental would be the one that probably impacts our residents the most. But I think that based on your expertise and what you've done, putting these fees, getting them up to where they need to be so that they're relevant, but while at the same time also contributing to the city's revenue will be a great help. And as well to make sure that we're following that basic guiding principle that was dictated when we started this committee, which is to try to see that we can get to the point where we're revenue neutral. Otherwise, if we were a private business, we would be shutting down because we would be losing money. So we want to follow that ideology there. So I think you've done a really good job. I think you addressed already a question I had, which was, where would you see any potential questioning or controversy? But I think your rationale explains it really well here. So I'm going to just see if there's any questions at all from the committee. If you have anything at all with regards to a fee here, if you think there's something that needs to be readdressed, or otherwise, if you feel that what we have here is good, then it'd be great if we could just get a motion to approve these fees. So I'm going to open it up. Before I open up to Councilmember Edens McCutcheon, I did see interim City Administrator Steve Cross. Maybe you have something you want to add before we get into any question.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would. Mr. Vunich had highlighted a few of the fees that fall within his area of responsibility, but I did want to point out there are quite a few increases in the Department of Administration. So I don't want to gloss over that. I want to point out that as you go down, because there's a very, very large number of fees that are administered by the Department of Administration that we've gone through and in many cases increased those fees as well. So as you go down the line, when you look at the center column for the proposed rate, you'll see in terms of business licenses and other types of licenses where we feel that we can gain some additional dollars. And the last column being the largest column, which is with the current rate. So you'll be able to see, when COVID is done and we're able to rent out the community room as we have done in the past for homeowners meetings and so forth, we've increased those kinds of fees. So there's quite a number of fees also from the Department of Administration where you'll see some nice increases as well. So overall, I think we're trending in the right direction in terms of generating some additional revenue for the city. And not just in a couple line items, but in quite a few line items, as you all have seen on this schedule.
Sorry about that. I'm on mute. Thanks for calling that out, those items there. It does say see attached. Was there supposed to be another attachment to this?
I guess there was. Is that not, okay? Not sure where. Kathy, did we not have that? What that was, but it is a lot of detail that the city clerk's area that handles liquor licenses and some other permits, where there was quite a bit of detail on the liquor license. And so, but at the end of the day, because it was just too much to put on here, so I have a document here, and I apologize that it's not part of the package, but I can send that out. But I think I may want to clarify some things because it's very detailed in terms of, identifying difference between malt liquor and non-intoxicating beer and intoxicating liquor. So I need to get into that a little bit more in terms of these liquor license fees which are different than the liquor license fees that we were discussing on Monday night's council meeting as it related to those 14 businesses that were selling, at bars and restaurants, the $750. This is different. So I need to get a little more clarification from the
This
city.
is a one-time license fee, like if a church is having an event and they want to have something like that, like they want to sell drink glasses of wine. Is that what you mean by getting a
It would appear
temporary
because
liquor license?
it's by the drink, from 37.50 increasing to 50. So I apologize, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite sure where some of these come into play versus the overall fee. So I need to do a little more investigation with our city clerk to find out about these types of fees.
All right, so maybe we'll hold off any questions on that until we get those details. And we might want to get that information before we take any action. All right, so Councilmember Edens, you're up.
Yeah, first of all, you guys did a tremendous amount of work, and I am very happy. My first question is, as we have already discussed, looking at raises in the future to CPI, my question for you is, do you need a formal recommendation out of the committee or an ordinance, or is this something that can be done in-house so that, do you want to look at these numbers every 5 years for a raise, every 2, every year? What do you need from me to make sure that rates in the future keep pace with inflation?
I would think, I'll speak first, if I may. I'm not sure that this would rise to the level of any kind of council action, to be
Okay.
honest. This is more of something internal from an administrative point of view in terms of my role, Mr. Vunich's role as the department head and others. It's just something that would be part of our daily activities, not daily, but what I'm trying to say is this would be something that we would just address, yearly or every other year, something like that, whatever and you all as a committee decide on. But I'm not sure, but you guys may have a different opinion, but I'm not sure that, because I will tell you, it scares me that if we take a document like this before 16 council members, this thing will be chewed up and spit out, and
I
never
don't
get.
want to do that. No.
I'd be real afraid of doing that, to be honest with you. But that's
No.
just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, as we turn over as council members, as staff turns over, how do we just make sure it happens sooner rather than another 25 years? And I just wanted to know the best way to lend support for that. So
I think
and
it's
if it's internal, then it's internal, and I won't worry about it.
Well, I think it's internal, but you raise a very good point, Ms. Edens, in terms of we just to make sure that we don't go 25 years. And I don't think we have. I think this has been looked at several times. This was not put together 25 years ago and has never been looked at since. But probably too much time has gone by before we've really taken a hard look at it and changed some things. So I think we just need to make sure internally we've got, it's in our tickler file in some form or fashion that we look at this on a regular basis. Whatever we define as regular basis every other year, or every year for that matter, to see if we can, change it. So your point is well taken.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and put a motion on the floor to adopt. Although you said you wanted to still work on this, though.
I think this was a great, opportunity for y'all to kind of see the work that we've done so far. But with your permission, with this committee's permission, I would like to have Joe and I work on this a little bit more. I want to get some clarification from the city clerk's office and some of those fees. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to see if we can maybe tighten this up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like with those items there, we want to get that information in front of us.
Okay, and last thing too, I know we talked about this before, especially as it related to events, but there's just certain types of events that are incredibly hard to make neutral in terms of cost and revenue, and when they have a value to society, sometimes you have to subsidize those costs. My question was,
And we're going to get to, sorry, just a quick point of information. the next item on the agenda is all about events.
Correct. But what I'm getting ready to say is that on some of the proposed rate increases for costs that are listed here, I was just wondering about the thought that went into it. We discussed what if the rate was higher for someone that didn't live in Wildwood versus someone that did. Was it easier just to make it a flat rate increase? Like for like scrapbooking, Shivering Shadows, Frozen Feet, it looks like there's just a flat rate for a participant. Was that just easier? Is that why we did that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
From the perspective of the department, if there was like a resident card or something that would be easy to provide to our residents, and then they could have a number associated with that card, or they could bring it with them to events, certainly we could make that. But quite frankly, with 9 zip codes and some being identified by Chesterfield, Baldwin, Pacific, trying to figure all that out, certainly could. Now, on entry forms for like some of our races, it's easy to put, are you a resident or not? And we could charge a reduced fee and an increased fee. So that's an option, certainly. Anywhere that we could do it where it's not us checking IDs or trying to compare an address to a list, I think the department would be more than willing to try that. And that may be part of what Mr. Cross is describing as tightening this up, if you'd like.
Well, and my other thought too was, especially with booth fees, is it have we also looked at, if you register by a certain date, X charge. If you register, with a week later, that it's X plus Z in charge. That might be another opportunity.
And we do have some late charges. So we always encourage early registration. That helps us, as you know, Ms. Edens, with any planning process. If you wait till the last minute and everybody registers, then we're going to be scrambling to get the booths up, or, enough shirts in the right sizes, that kind of thing. Some of the booth fees, though, are set by the commission, like the Wildwood Celebration Commission.
Okay.
They try to provide us input. So in some regards, I'm making a recommendation. That recommendation will eventually have to go back to the commission. I can't imagine them saying it's not appropriate, because they're cognizant that things cost and that we need to basically manage the cost as best as possible. And one way to do that is through revenue increases.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
If I could add, we also added on some of the booth fee rentals. We've added rental fees recently that we didn't before for tables, chairs, tents, those types of things. Mr. Vinch was correct. Our registration software, it's by zip code, is how residence based. So we have to have all 9 zip codes that are in Wildwood listed as residents, and then we have to manually evaluate any registration that comes in the 7 zip codes that are shared amongst other communities. So, and we do have some like race day registrations where the fee goes up, plein air registration, there are some that we establish a day of fee that's higher.
And what you're describing there is probably an issue that our neighboring cities have as well, because same goes for Chesterfield, Ellisville, Eureka. You go to Ellisville, you go use a swimming pool, they're probably going to ask you if you're a resident, or have to show some kind of proof of residency to get the resident rate.
Right.
So,
yeah, and that's just like in the dog park, we only allow residents. So they have to submit a utility bill and driver's license, and then we check it against our database and stuff. So yes.
But I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I mean, this is a good start. And as I say, Mr. Vunish and I can sit down and incorporate some of the suggestions that you all have now in terms of maybe expanding this a little bit and say, well, on-time registration is this amount, or a late registration is this amount, and do that. But I would also envision now that we have this thinking going forward, as an event comes up, it's an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we can do this or that, something we're not thinking about now, but at the time of the event, we might be able to say, okay, hey, we're going to charge this or this up, and then update this schedule. So there may be some changes to this just in the future when we think of a, you know, a better way of charging participants. So we may not think of everything now, but certainly, you know, it's going to be in the front of our minds now going forward. Every event that comes up, how do we want to price that out, if you will, to the people participating? And I think at that point, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, if this is an administrative type decision, this is something that I don't think, you know, you guys tell me if we think, you know, if Joe and I are talking and it's a Shivering Shadows or whatever, these are not published fees or anything. You know, when the documentation goes out, and if Joe feels that, you know what, hey, we can get $30 or, you know, or whatever, I mean, we just make the change and we move on. That doesn't require council approval or anything. Those decisions are left to us as the staff at City Hall to make those kinds of decisions, I think. Does anybody disagree with that?
I think to your point, you know, the two items that you addressed, sorry, Steve. I don't know why I said that, but two items that you said are accurate in that, yes, I mean, some of these fees, when it comes to a certain event, you probably have a lot of flexibility to the point where you finalize all the material, the marketing and the setup. So that certainly can change depending on what the environment's like. And then I would think too, from the other reason, I don't know that it's the best use of the council's time to be micromanaging, you know, fees when we're talking about a couple of dollars here. I mean, if it's something maybe significant, if we get feedback, we want to pass that along to you. But it's a better use of our time to focus on other more important things. And the same thing goes with you. You know, I think that's my opinion on it. All right. Councilman McCutcheon, I think, well, Joe, I'll let you make a comment and then we'll go to Councilman McCutcheon.
And I apologize, Ms. McCutcheon. I just wanted to add that I just noticed that there may be a column missing on the table that I apologize for. And that column would say how the fee is changed, so to speak, because like all the zoning fees are set forth in the code. And so if we move forward with recommendations to increase those fees, it actually has to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council and be done by ordinance. So with your all's permission, Mr. Cross and I will add additional column onto this and identify how the fee has to be changed. If it can be done administratively, if it has to be done by ordinance, etc. My apology, I should have thought of that before.
That's a good point, Joe.
All right. All right, Councilman McCutcheon, you're up.
Hey,
And
Joe,
thank you, Ms. McCutcheon.
I have two words for that. Oh, boy.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for that information, because I was just about to ask that question. And then the other question I have is, did you all do any comparison with any neighboring cities regarding fees?
We tried. I'll give you. I mean, we reached out to a few cities through some organizations. Didn't get a lot of feedback. And Lisa, Julie, and I were trying to gather some information, and we didn't get much help from some of the ones that we were looking at. I don't know if Mr. Vunich if he did that or had any better luck than we did.
A lot of the event fees we use for example, like the races and hikes, we use an outside company to help us with the race management, the timing, so to speak. And Gary contacted them and just ran by the fees that we have versus what other municipalities or organizations charge. So we did that for those. The subdivision and zoning ones, I looked at those just from neighboring municipalities. Generally speaking, we're going to be on the low side, but we could certainly increase that. And that's another item, if you'd like, we could basically just give you a sampling of some of the other communities and what they charge. That would be something Mr. Newberry could do, and we could provide his background information.
I'd really like to see that. And then I have a couple of specific questions. Candidate filing fee, is that standard, the $10, or can that be increased, or how is it comparative to other municipalities?
I think that's where that additional column that Mr. Vunich just spoke of will help. And again, I'd have to circle back to the city clerk, but I think that may be either in legislation or an ordinance about what that is. But I'm not going to say specifically because I don't know, but this will be a good opportunity when we go through each one of these with that third column to say, can it change? And if so, what it will take. But I'm under the impression, but I may perhaps mistakenly so, that that's kind of like hard coded. So I'll have to check into that, Ms. McCutcheon, but thank you.
And then soliciting. So is that like a fine when somebody knocks on your door without a permit? So what do you mean by soliciting?
That is a permit that you have to obtain when you come to City Hall. You need to get a solicitor's permit, which I think it covers, you can get 3 of those in a year or something like that. So where exactly is that? Oh, there it is. Never mind. Okay, so we actually increased that from $25 to $50, but that's a permit that they're supposed to carry with them so that when they come, they come to the door.
And they do not.
Of course, they always have it. Well, what's funny is that this occurred within the last, say a month and a half, because we're not giving out solicitor's permits, and we haven't done that since the pandemic, or I'm not sure what happened before I came, but I absolutely said to the city clerk and the deputy city clerk, we're not issuing, because we're not going to encourage people going to door. But I think it was that very day that they knock on my door at what time do you think? 6 p.m. of course. Here's a solicitor, wanting to sell me siding or something like that. And I didn't call him on it because I'd rather go and have my dinner. But clearly he didn't have a solicitor permit because we weren't issuing them. So, but that's what it is. It gives them the right to go around for a period of time, and only so many per year. But that's a fee. It's not a fine or anything like that. What happens is, we can't do a fine, but what you can do, obviously, as everyone on this call knows, you can call the police, and the police can handle that if they're there and they don't have a permit.
So my question was, and since they don't get since they don't get permits, probably nor here nor there, but if we could increase that cost, maybe to deter some of the solicitation. You see a lot of residents with the stickers, no soliciting on their door. And I know this has been a sticking point for several residents. So I don't know if that's something you want to look at.
Well, we doubled it from 25 to 50. If you are suggesting, if you want to go higher than that, we can do that. But we did take it from 25 to 50.
Yeah, I was thinking 75 is my thought. I don't know what you all think about it. It's certainly open for discussion. And then I know, Joe, recently we increased the traffic generation assessment, and I think we increased it as high as it could go. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am. And we use the construction cost index that's published annually to increase. The good news about the TGA, it's never gone down.
Yeah. And can you explain to me what the telecommunication review fee is? What does that entail?
I'll let Kathy do that. She manages those. So thank you.
Any application for modifications to towers that we do administratively. So if they're swapping out antennas, remote radio units, those types of things that don't need a new conditional use permit, that's where we assess that fee.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, you got more?
No, the only other question I had was about grading permits. It says no change. Why is that the case?
Mr. Brown provided that information, and my recollection is that they were just increased recently.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
I'll verify that though, Ms. McCutcheon, for you.
All right, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do next steps on this is, as we talked, Steve, you're going to take the lead on following up on some additional items, work with Joe, Kathy, the additional column that we talked about, and then we'll probably just need to get another look at it and see if we have any other questions for you. And then depending on any particular fees that require some kind of action, if it is dictated by ordinance, then we will want to do that. move that forward. But otherwise, then you should be able to, of course, assuming that, the committee's on board with it, I think be able to move forward, and certainly we can present that if we need to council for their awareness. Maybe it's a work session informational item or something like that.
Chair, yes, we can look at it if anyone on the committee, after you've had maybe perhaps a little more time to look at it, if you have any particular suggestions, I will simply make one correction to what you said in terms of looking into it. I can tell you that Kathy has already said if I get near her and ask her to make any changes, she will hit me over the head. So.
Well, I didn't want to leave. I want to leave her out.
You're a liar. I can say that now. He's
Yeah,
full of
what am
beans.
I gonna do? Fire you?
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll
I'll
probably
make any changes you all want before next Thursday.
before next Thursday. Yeah. So anyway, Kathy's always ready to help, but so we're doing a lot of kidding with her, but we did give her the day off on Monday, however.
That's good. All right. Well, I guess the next item we'll get into the agenda is the outline of the city events with final recommendations. So do the same thing. Let you guys do an intro, speak to what you want to highlight on this, and then we'll open up.
Mr. Garitano, with your permission as chair, I had one more item on the fees.
Oh, yeah, sure.
When Miss Edens was identifying, trying to avoid having some fees be, let's say, 25 years old and others maybe 7 years old, as part of the strategic planning process that City Council is going through now, and as you know, the number 2 item was financial resources, kind of coming up with ideas about new revenues. Maybe as part of that, the City Council can hardwire a review process. Maybe it's every 5 years or 10 years, but maybe as part of that strategic planning goal, what Ms. Edens identified could actually be incorporated. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and make sure we do that going forward. One quick note too, I wanted to highlight, because there was mention of it, that you said there was a fee that somehow is per state statute. Maybe that's the only one, but if there are others that you see are restricted because of state statute, I would be curious to know, because I can certainly take that to like the Missouri Municipal League, because I'm sure then there's other cities that are probably in the same situation. And maybe we could look at it legislatively through the state to see how we can address those types of items. We're actually making good progress on several items, now with the state. So that's the comment I'll make on that. All right, so give it back to you to talk about then the event fees.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you know, in our last meeting in 2020, we spent a great deal of time talking about the event schedule associated with the City of Wildwood through its Department of Planning and Parks. We actually had, I think, an excellent conversation just about why we do the things we do, what are the shortcomings, and what are the strengths. And so tonight, through the efforts of Ms. Arnett, Mr. Cross, and the Department of Planning and Parks, we are providing to you what we believe is the final version of our conversation from that meeting in December of 2020. I do want to identify that Ms. Arnett did a fine job of kind of identifying those events or activities where we are increasing the fees. Those are shown in that green shaded column. Those events we are recommending be eliminated are shown kind of by the light red color. And ultimately, I think it makes it much easier to read and understand what achievements the committee has made in terms of its recommendation. If you're looking for the bottom line number in terms of the increases in fees for certain events, the elimination of other activities, it calculates out to almost a $64,000 revenue windfall, so to speak, for the city of Wildwood. And so if you add that in with the zoning authorizations, we're getting pretty close now to, we're getting up around to $150,000 in new revenues that just have come from our discussion, so to speak, to date. So tonight, we'd like to think we have the final version for your consideration and action. Thank you.
All right, any other comments by Steve or Kathy before we dive in? All right, I'll just introduce as well, just to say, again, another great job looking at this. This is great that you put the information, just as we've been talking about, laying it out in front of us, determining what the attendance, which certainly tells us what kind of impact it could have. And then those columns that are on the far right, proposed revenue and the proposed net cost. To what Councilmember Eden said earlier, we are a city. We collect revenues as a city, and certainly we provide services, and part of that is providing events to the community as well. And so not necessarily is it that we're going to have revenue neutral across the board, everything, but in those instances where we have perhaps registration type systems, or at least we can control it, it makes probably good sense to look at it. And then as well, for those events like concerts, I mean, that's just the cost of running a city, providing services like that. So my initial comments just in general are that it looks good. Looking at some of these events, especially where there's a cost, where we're providing, whether it's, sweatshirts, shirts or something, these fees are justified because we're obviously giving folks something in return in addition to the event itself. So I think that makes sense. And then from an elimination perspective, the color coding is great. I mean, there are 3 rows color coded, but I kind of look at it as really 2 events that are primarily impacted, and then the plein air reception. The plein air still occurs, the event still occurs. It's the reception that costs the city about $6,300, $6,379. In that case, would be eliminated. But there's, we're still going to have the event. We'll still have prizes. There just won't be, that gathering that occurs. So just again, my comments in general are good. So I'll let Councilmember McCutcheon, who's got a hand up, and certainly Councilmember Edens probably will have something you can ask any questions you got at this point and get in there.
I'll just echo what Joe said. I think it's a fabulous job. I know we spent a lot of time on it. Regarding some of the events, Steve already addressed that. When you put them together, you can maybe adjust those fees. The question I do have is, I know you were going to have a discussion with Celebrate Wildwood Committee regarding combination of the art festival with Celebrate Wildwood, or what they were looking at as a budget. Can somebody fill me in on that?
Yes, ma'am. The Wildwood Celebration Commission did meet, and the inclination, at least for this year, is to have the combined events. And I think the inclination in future years is to try to have 2 standalone events. Now, it was explained to the commission members that obviously we're trying to understand revenue neutral and certainly save money where we can. And so for this year, given what has happened with COVID-19, it will be a combined event. And there was a commitment, I thought, on their part to basically kind of, after this year, rethink how we do the event completely. And one of the things that came out of the initial discussion is in 2021, there will not be a parade per se, because there were a lot of factors that went into the decision. Principal among them, the Lafayette High School Marching Band wasn't available at the end of September. And I think the inclination of the commission members now is starting to kind of trend toward what makes Wildwood unique, or what makes it special. What has brought people here and keeps them here? And so we're substituting the parade this year with a trail event. And I think that's going to be real positive. It'll kick off the Saturday morning event. It'll bring people into the town center, and we intend to then kind of give them a free beverage or food ticket, and inexpensive, obviously, but that'll keep them there through the day, hopefully, or make them come back after they go home and clean up.
I think that's a great idea.
So I can assure you that there's more to follow on this, is I guess what I'm saying is that we're going to do it in 2021, and we know we've got to figure this situation out better than we have in the past. And hopefully it'll be something that'll come to the Planning and Parks Committee first.
Yeah, well, I definitely think it's an event we need to keep, tighten up where we can and celebrate our city. It brings a lot of residents together, and it brings community together as well. So I think it is a very important event, but I do think that wherever we can tighten the dollars, it would be to the city's advantage to do that.
All right. Councilmember Eden, you had your hand up.
Yes, one just thought for the future, we could end up on some sort of still restricted limit of gatherings for another, year. And then that could potentially require all types of events for pre-registration, and then multiple days if we wanted to host something like an art festival in the future. If we're stuck in a pandemic with mutations, what would that look like without entirely canceling it? Would that be something that 250 people registered at a time, but we charged a fee for a participant, and then that would allow us to offset costs over the next 3 days? So I think there's potential future options that I hope we don't have to go to, that aren't reflected in this budget, that we will have to creatively think about. Once you lose things for a number of years, it's always harder to get them started again. And how you keep traditions alive is with frequency. And so I anticipate future changes. Wish it wouldn't be that way. The only other thing that I can really think of to tighten up would maybe be, and we've talked about it before, some of that board commission appreciation event costs, but we also talked about how we had improved the quality of gifts for individuals that have volunteered their time. So I'm not asking us to cheap out as a city. I'm just wondering if there is maybe a different type of gift than what we would normally traditionally give that could be purchased at bulk value. It is still quality, but can save $10 to $20 a person, because that can add up over the next couple of years. But again, I say that using my Wildwood pen, right? So it's just for the number of people at the event. That's basically 3 times the cost of Winterfest. So looking at that makes a difference. The other thing too is, as we continue to grow as a city and we get people to form a tradition and come to things regularly, then 5 years down the road, maybe we had an event that used to draw 1,000 that now draws several thousand, and then we can look at charging $1 and you get a stamp on your hand per person. But it's just not an option right now because of the attendance, because we're trying to get it down, trying to get it off its feet. And so we want to find that sweet spot with making some money, but not discouraging participation. And I'm afraid with some things, if we just try to be totally revenue, cost neutral, we're going to lose, participation. The other thing that's not reflected in this, but has been a general discussion point, and trying to find a way to vocalize this as a formal statement from the committee, is we've talked about how we'd like to try something, in a post pandemic limited universe. The revenue model proposed by the WBA, I was on that committee when they presented it as a potential replacement to the barbecue ban.
You're on mute, Lauren.
Oh man, and I had some brilliant things to say, and I don't know when I muted myself. So
You were at the part about the potential barbecue.
Oh, the most brilliant part of all. Of course. Well, let me just backtrack and hit you with it. But I was on. So sorry if it's repetitive. I was on the committee when that was presented by the WBA president, and it was not only well thought out, but it did have the potential to help pay for additional events. The smaller events, the runs, the Winterfest, and we just haven't had an opportunity to try that and see how that works. And because of that, there's no way to really reflect that in the budget. So to other council members watching or people concerned, I would say there are still alternatives. We just, because of current global circumstances, haven't been able to try them. But I'd like there to be some sort of semi-formal statement from this committee that we are committed to trying those new revenue models in the future.
Go ahead, Steve, and then Councilman McCutcheon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make one statement, and it kind of echoes, Mr. Chair, your comment at the beginning of the discussion with regards to the events, that every event, it cannot be revenue neutral. Some we can move towards that, but it's just a cost of doing business in terms of being a city and offering amenities and so forth to the city. With regards to boards and commissions and appreciation night, for someone who has served as the treasurer of the city for 17 years now, except for the stints where I've had to resign and sit in this chair, and hopefully that'll be a lot longer sitting in this chair. But that is a super nice event for what I would, in my humble opinion, consider to be our most valuable resource, are the volunteers that serve on these commissions and those that are appointed, and do all the work behind the scenes and spend the hours and hours and hours in meetings and so forth. I think it's a small price to have a catered dinner of some sort in a pen or whatever. I would hate to see us try to nickel and dime something and take that away from the people that, I mean, without them, we couldn't do half of the things that we do, from all the volunteers. So just my plug as a humble appointed official for many, many years it's kind of a nice thing. And some of those gifts that we got are very nice. Kathy and Joe and Gary and whoever gets involved in it, I mean, they do a great job in picking out some really nice swag, if you will. I'd kind of hate to see us, be, what's the saying, a penny wise and pound foolish or something like that. Because boy, we need those volunteers. I mean, they're the lifeblood of what we do in this city.
Councilman McCutcheon, you're up.
Yeah, I was going about the same direction Steve does, but I was wondering, could we combine those two events? Would that be a cost saving, or would that be a cost increase? Or Joe, Kathy?
Are you referencing the board and commission or the business appreciation, combining those two? I'm
Combining
sorry.
those two.
Certainly we could explore that, but in past years, we've always kind of settled back on the volunteers we have. We really want to kind of recognize them more so than anything else. Whereas if we brought the businesses in, we'd kind of actually de-emphasize both of them, because we'd have to share the spotlight between the two. And so we've always kind of fallen back, as Mr. Cross just mentioned. Without our volunteers, many of you who started with Wildwood were volunteers on some type of board and commission before you became an elected official. We couldn't do the job without you. Kathy, Ms. Arnett, Mr. Cross, and I, we can't vote on one thing. So it's really yeah. So I stand in that line that says we probably don't even do enough for them now, and we could do more.
Oh, no, I agree, we don't. I was just thinking as far as the catering and so forth going, but I definitely see the reason for having them separate.
I would add, we do spend less on the gift for the business appreciation reception. That's a conscious effort. Not that the businesses aren't important, but they don't maybe spend the hours directly related to the city that the boards and commissions do. I don't know that we would have the space at City Hall. The community room generally is full. So we would be, it would be segregated into the chambers and the community room if we tried to combine them. And my only suggestion to maybe save money on the board and commission event is to quit making so many committees. And then there'd be less people.
Yeah,
Here,
we'll be
here.
passing an ordinance on that one, but yeah, you got your word in, Kathy. That's good.
All right, I'm done.
You're good.
We
Yeah,
walked right
we
into
get
it.
you. No more committees, no more
Okay.
task forces, no more boards. You're right. We need a moratorium for a while.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could add one more thing. As you know, with the Village Green proceeding forward, we're very close to getting the master plan for its development. And we've heard loud and clear from the city council, as well as the committees, that we need to basically factor into the design of Village Green things that we rent now that hopefully we won't have to rent in the future. So things like the stage, electric, some of the setup, those things eventually, if we're successful, will go away and we won't have those reoccurring costs. And I think you'll see maybe in a few years, if my prediction comes true, that a lot of the large events, Celebrate Wildwood, the concerts, the art festival, those numbers will drop because just renting the stage is like $3,000. So I think we're going to see the foresight of the city council to find a place for our events will bear fruit for many years to come. Thank you.
Good. All right. Just being cognizant of time. I know it's 6 o'clock, so don't want to keep anybody longer than we have to, but I think we've had some really good discussion here. So what we could do is either we can try to meet one more time once we get the updated documents, and then hopefully that would be it. And then we'll figure out then exactly those next steps from there. I think that might be the best route. I was going to think, well, is there another way? Maybe do we save a meeting? But I think we might just still want to just connect and just have a discussion around it. So we'll get another meeting on the calendar and we'll work on that, I guess, between staff and all of us to figure out a date that works. And then, of course, that ties into the timing of when the document will be ready. So I'll leave that to you, Steve and Joe, to figure out when you think you can get it turned around. But I think we're going to have good report back and say, look, we've got some good opportunities that we've identified. So that's where I'm thinking at. And unless there's any other comment about it or question, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hesitant to bring this up, but I feel obligated to do it since this email today was directed to the committee from Mr. Brost, Councilmember Brost. I don't know if you all had a chance to look at it. I don't know what you want to do with it.
Yeah, I saw it.
But it's very, very long and it was directed to the committee. So if you hadn't had a chance to look at it, maybe we don't discuss it now, but I wanted to bring it to your attention if you had not seen it. And you can think about if there's a response required. I don't feel, it was directed to the committee when copied myself, Mr. Vunich and others, but the whole council for that matter. So anyway, don't know what your thoughts were about that.
Well, I apologize. I have not checked emails this afternoon. And so I didn't know there was one until you mentioned it. So I apologize to Larry. I know Larry's watching here. Wish I would have read that to be able to at least keep that in mind as we're having discussion or address what's in the email. But I'd have to read it, and I'm certainly willing to give Councilmember Brost a call and see what comments there are and what we can address. And if it's something that's pertaining to the committee, because our focus is very much on just the fees here that we have discussed. I don't know if that's the scope of it. So we can, or if it does pertain to the committee, then we'll discuss it then at the next meeting. That's it. I haven't looked at it, so I'd have to check it.
Mr. Chair, can I make another comment?
Yeah.
Regarding the email, I think there were a lot of things in the email that didn't necessarily pertain to the jurisdiction of this committee. And I think it needs to be reiterated, the mayor's directive as to what this committee was charged to do. So there were things in there that were not related to the charge of this committee.
All right. Yeah. And then we just got to make sure we want to find the right place to take that feedback and figure out how to address it. So, Larry, I think I hear you, and I'm sure you always bring a good perspective. And glancing at it, you said it's bringing out the bean counter in you. So we need that. So I will look through it and, give you a call and see how we can address it. And again, it might pertain, maybe it's stuff we talk about in Hammond Public Works or something like that, or in another committee. We'll figure it out though. All right. I don't have anything else at this point.
Mr. Chair, so Mr. Cross and I'll look at the calendar, see when times are available and send something out. Would maybe a month from now or so be okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Totally. I mean, at this point right now, I think we're good. I mean, the budget for the year's already been set. It's not like we're going to change it tomorrow or anytime soon. If anything, this could potentially have an impact. It would be around mid-year we would realize it. So I think we're on track here.
Well, we'll shoot for the end of March and find some dates and send those out to you. So thank you.
All right. All right. Anything else? All right. Motion to adjourn. All right. Made by Councilmember Eden, seconded by McCutcheon. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
All right.
Joe, so I'll see you in what? What time is our architectural review board meeting?
In about 23 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, see you then.
Okay. Take care. See you.